All right, so today, it's my pleasure to have a couple young ladies come, and there's another gentleman that's gonna join later, just to kind of tell their story and talk about heroin a little bit. So I'll let you all introduce yourself. Savannah,
Hi, I'm Savannah.
And I'm Courtney.
Courtney, and this Savannah's the one I always tell you my poster child. So anyway, we're trying to make a difference in Missouri and the Midwest, and it's very difficult. So I want to thank these young ladies for having the courage to come and talk with you today. And I'm just going to turn it over to you and get out of the way.
Can I sit?
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Hi, I'm Savannah. I'm 23 years old. I was addicted to heroin for about 4.5 years. I started basically as any high school student would. Partying high school student. I was a cheerleader though. I got good grades. I dated a quarterback. I dated most of the football team actually. I was homecoming court, stuff like that. I would drink sometimes, and I kind of realized like when I would drink, I wouldn't just go to a party and have a beer or, take a few shots and be woo. I would be so belligerent, I wouldn't be able to either remember my name, who brought me there, how I was getting home. I went through like 6 cell phones. When I started smoking pot, and this was all happening when I got my driver's license when I was 16 to 17. When I started smoking pot, I would smoke until I basically threw up or passed out. Same with pills. When I would take pills, I would, snort and snort and snort until, we'd have to pull over. I can't drive. I just can't drive right now. Or I would throw up in McDonald's bags in my car. So I kind of knew, when I did something, I either, went hard or I went home. And when I was about 17 and a half, probably, my boyfriend at the time, who I'd been dating for about a year, and of course he wasn't, a good guy. He was kind of a bad boy. And he lived with his sister and his mom, and his sister dated a guy who shot heroin. And, we tried it, we snorted it a few times. I really liked it. Like John said, I got sick when I first tried it, and at first I was like, dude, this sucks. But it was convenient, like you said. It was, I could access it easy, it was always at the house. If she was going to the city, I would drive down, and I could get, one button for $10 or $5, and $10 I could get a few of them, and we could get high and just hang out in his room. And by that time I wasn't doing very good in school. I didn't really care about that. I stopped cheerleading. I stopped really hanging out with my family. And my dad, he was a diabetic, so of course there were syringes in the house all the time. So I grabbed a few one day, and I remember going to his house. I drove over there, and he already had some pills, which are the buttons of heroin. And, he was like, well, I said that, I have these rigs. We can try to shoot it if you want, but I'm not sure how to do it. And immediately he knew how to do it, cooked it up. And I remember the feeling I got when I did my first shot of heroin, and it was the total opposite of the first time I snorted it. I couldn't stand it when I snorted it, but I basically fell in love. I was crazy about this drug the minute I shot it up, and from then on it was kind of just like, just a steep dive off of a cliff. When I graduated high school, I was an active heroin user. I've used it daily, shot it daily. I went to school high, I did everything high. My parents, they had no clue. I remember I graduated high school, barely. I got my diploma. After that, graduation day, I spent my, $1,000 I got in cash. I went straight to the city, straight to St. Louis, spent about $500 on heroin. I think the next day spent the rest of it, me and my boyfriend at the time. A few months later, I remember I took a shot of heroin. I was feeling good. I told my boyfriend, I'm gonna go out in the garage, smoke a cigarette. the next thing I know, I wake up and there's about 10 ambulances, ambulance, medical people around me, cutting my jacket. I was freezing cold. The only thing I was worried about is they were cutting my jacket I just bought. It was my favorite jacket, and I was like, don't cut my jacket! But they cut it. I'd overdosed. I was dead for 1 minute and 52 seconds. They shot an adrenaline shot to my heart, which I guess reverses it, flushes the heroin out. That was the second time I'd OD'd. The first time was when I snorted it. I didn't really OD, but I was completely blue. I was being slapped when I woke up, so obviously I either did way too much or I overdosed. So that night was the night my mom found out and my dad. And I will never remember, or I will always remember and never forget how my boyfriend's mom at the time, since it was on his garage floor, she had called my mom and she didn't hang up when she was leaving a voicemail, and she had said, Barb, this is Glenda, I need you to call me back as soon as you can, something happened. Well, she didn't hang up the phone, so when my mom got out of the shower and listened to the voicemail after that, all she heard was, Savannah's dead, she's blue on the floor, nobody can get her to wake up, with sirens in the background. And I remember waking up and somebody telling me that my mom was on the way to the hospital, and I just knew, she knows I'm shooting heroin now. So things from that moment on, my life had completely changed. I got home a week later using again. This was in 2007. I was an active user, a daily user. I didn't do anything. I could barely keep a job. When I was working, I would steal money from everyone at my work. I would steal money out of the cash register and blame it on other people. I would clock in as somebody else, take their register money, clock out. I was scandalous, shady, a liar, a thief. I was a horrible person, and that's all because of the drug, because I would have never ever dreamed of doing anything like this if I wasn't using heroin. So I used for about 2 years. Me and my boyfriend, it was a horrible relationship. It was using and fighting and fighting and using and using and fighting. And when we were dope sick, we hated each other. When we used, we were in love. And that's basically any relationship you have with an addict, that's how it's gonna be. And 2009, December 2009, after using for 2 years more, I got caught with it. I was at a Quick Trip, and I was flicking the needle and about to shoot up, I remember, and I had been there for 5 minutes because obviously I was already messed up. So for a while I sat with my head in my lap, because when you do a lot of heroin, you nod out. And it's just a feeling of being really high. You just, nod out, you wake up. So after nodding out probably for 10 minutes on and off and finally cooking a shot up, I went to stick it in my arm and hear bangs on the window. Ma'am, you need to put that down. So I quickly dropped it on the ground, and a rig, a syringe, it has a plunger that you can push and suck up. I tried to push the shot out, and they had guns at me. There was about 6 of them. They were flying into the Quick Trip parking lot. So I put my hands on the steering wheel, got a 13-hour hold. They told me they were gonna test it. I kept using, kept on using. About 6 months later, well actually the next year, 2010 in February, I met another guy. He had been in and out of prison, up and down with dope habits. He first learned how to shoot heroin in Missouri Department of Corrections prison. We had a horrible relationship for months. He was in and out of rehab, I was in and out of rehabs. My parents still knew I was a heroin addict, didn't want anything to do with me anytime. Me and him, I was living with him in his grandparents' basement. We were robbing jewelry stores, liquor stores, stealing from his grandparents, forging checks. We would take checks off of neighbors' porches when they get them, just delivered. We probably wrote $5,000 worth of different people's money we stole. I stole about $10,000 from my own parents. He probably stole the same from his grandparents. And then he went back to prison. So I was kind of using on my own until one day I decided to turn myself in July, because I had a warrant for felony possession of heroin, because obviously it came back, it was heroin. So I turned myself in. After I turned myself in, I came out, tried to do good. They put me on drug court for a 1 year, which is kind of like a program where you have random drops weekly. You go to meetings, you have a probation officer. After your year, if you complete it, there's different levels, but after you complete it, your felony's gone. Well, I lasted a great 14 days on drug court, was getting high again. Then I had a few, they do these things where they kind of put you in jail. It's kind of like you get one warning, you get another warning, 1 day in jail, 2 day in jail. Well, the third time I had a dirty drop or a diluted drop because I drank so much water that they couldn't really test my pee. I was kicked out of drug court, and October 5th of 2010 was the last time I ever stuck a needle in my arm. This year I celebrated 2 years clean. I spent from October 5th to December 22nd in St. Charles County Jail. Got out on SIS probation, which it's suspended in sentence, so if you complete the 5 years, you get your felony gone. My conditions of probation were so much. I had to go to a meeting every single day for the first year. I have hair follicle tests still every 90 days, which those are like $100 each. So it's a pretty costly thing to get in trouble, have an addiction, period. So I've been on probation since then, but I've also been clean since then, and I'm registering for school in January. I want to make this my life's work. Addiction is a horrible thing. They say 23% of people who try an opiate will become addicted. So if you take about a quarter of these people in this room and shoot them up with heroin, about a quarter of those people would actually become addicted to it. And it is literally, I'm sure they can agree, the devil in substance form. It will take Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. It will make you do things, hurt people that you love the most. You would steal I stole from my nieces and nephews their baby clothes. I took my dad's army jacket and pawned it. I have taken my mother's wedding ring and pawned it. I have taken money, so much. It's just a horrible process to go through, and it's hard to come back, but once you do, it's worth it. It's kind of like a steep drop when you get addicted, and it's a long hill up when you are trying to stay sober and get clean, but it becomes really easy. It's hard, but it's easy at the same time. I always say, just kind of like heroin, I shot heroin every day. That was part of my daily routine. Staying clean now and not shooting heroin is part of my daily routine. So this is my first time that I've actually ever shared my story besides Narcotics Anonymous meetings, but everybody gets to share theirs sometimes there. So any questions I'd love to answer if you guys have any, but thank you so much for letting me share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions?
Any questions?
I don't have a question,
Sure.
but I wanted to tell you how very, very proud I am of you.
Thank you.
You look really good.
Thanks.
You did a very good job this first time.
Thank you so much.
Let's do this though. Go ahead, Ms. Jones.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just saying, okay, just looking at you, you couldn't just tell that, you were heroin addict, like you just.
And that's what I get a lot. People are like, you shot heroin in your arms? Heroin? I'm like, yeah, for quite a while, actually, for almost 4.5 years. And that's why the stigma, is completely, it's just so different than it is, because, you wouldn't look at her. She looks like an innocent 18-year-old girl, and you would never know that she shot heroin, It's just, heroin addicts are not, bums under a bridge, or, the people you see on the side of the highway asking for money with the cardboard signs, They're not laying in bed listening to Jimi Hendrix, just being cool, That's not a heroin addict. I've seen them from, covered in tattoos to, a 16-year-old girl who was a straight A student. It ranges from here to here, and, you know, it's just sick because once, you know, like I said, once you try it, some people, they just, you know, they don't go back. Sometimes it is too late, and unfortunately they do pass away, and sometimes, you know, you get success stories, and, you know, it's just a horrible thing to go through.
Yeah, I have a question. As
Sure.
a parent,
Mhm.
I have a 14 and a 17-year-old, and I noticed that you had said that your parents didn't know that you were a heroin addict.
Right.
How were you able to keep that from them? And, I mean,
Right.
it just seems like they would have known.
I know it
So-
seems like such a big issue, you know, like such a huge thing, like it's not like, oh, you know, just something small, you know, like you change your hair color, but it, you know, you think you shoot heroin, your parents would notice, especially being a teenager and living with them, but, now that I look back, I kind of am like, how the hell did I hide that? And I even talked to my mom, you know, a couple weeks ago, and she was like, you know, I didn't see any of the signs at the time, but now that I look back, you were always in your room. My spoons went missing, you know, and she just thought, oh, Savannah has them upstairs, you know, because I would eat upstairs because I was never around them, and they had their bedroom upstairs and mine, or downstairs, and mine was upstairs. And my, you know, my mom says I was isolating myself, you know, my mood changed, I was, you know, always mad for some reason. She said, my eyes would just glaze over, I'd have no pupils. You know, now she sees the signs, and I think one of the biggest things you can honestly do is, you know, talk to your kids, you know where they're going, know who they're with. Like, you know, I went from every day being with my best friend Dana and Alyssa to, you know, being with this person, you know, or Johnny, or Bill, or, you know, Ted, or whoever I was with, you know. I would never be on the phone around my mom because it was, of course, always about heroin on the phone. So, you know, I think it is a lot, you know, communicating with your kids, because my mom never asked me questions, you know, she just kind of let it, she brushed it off, I guess, and, you know, I figured I was getting away with it, so keep doing it. So, I'll just talk to your kids, honestly, that's probably the best thing you can do. Yes, John?
Okay, so, and I know this will be edited, so that's fine. But a question would be, so what do you think, you know, we're out there trying to spread awareness, prevention, education, kind of what you were just talking about. But what do you think that parents can do, like any parent can do, to kind of look for? What would you tell them? What you just said, the isolation and spoons missing it's funny, but it's true.
Definitely, the mood changes.
You know, and I think, yeah, what I see is like tiredness, pinpoint pupils, the droopy look, sleeping a lot, nodding out, a change in appetite, sleep, maybe they're up all night, you know, stealing, money
Stuff
missing,
missing is a huge one.
syringe tops, burned up stuff,
Black marks on your countertops in the bathrooms.
chop marks, you know, from a razor blade or something like that. But, you know, the bottom line is, and this is, I want to make this really clear, the bottom line is that this can happen to anybody's child. Anybody's child. You can be super mom, super dad, super religion, super whatever, right? But nobody is immune from this. And if you look at comorbid kinds of psychiatric problems, you know, we talked about if you have attention deficit disorder or any other kind of mood disorder, you're a shy, passive kind of kid, you have a depressive disorder, you don't fit in anywhere, right? And that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, why DARE failed, because it let go of kids too fast. It gave information out, just like I always reiterate, the Nixon administration, you know, they did all that drug ed back in the late 60s or early 70s when the Vietnam War was going high because of heroin. It was a big reason, the Ho Chi Minh Trail of China and China white heroin, but never had the purity rates in quantity, I think, that we do right now. In price, that's the other difference. So when you have a comorbid kind of psychiatric problem, it's going to raise your probability for addiction. So those kids are at high risk, you know. But my point is that this can happen to anybody's family. It doesn't matter if you live in the inner city, you live in a wealthy suburb, you live in a rural area, anybody can become a heroin addict. And there's a certain stigma, negative stigma associated with heroin, and a lot of parents that we see in treatment centers can't even say the word heroin at first. It's like, you know, whether they're affluent or whatever, because, you know, it's real different if your child's smoking pot or drinking some beer, which maybe their parents did, or even, you know, tried cocaine. But if they're taking a syringe and sticking it in their arm and stealing, you know, because what happened to Savannah is her brain was literally hijacked by this product, by this drug, by this substance. She never would have done any of the behaviors that she did, you know, illegal, antisocial, criminalistic kind of behaviors, if it wasn't for her relationship with heroin. You know, and I want to make that perfectly clear. So there has to be a distinction in our penal system, because we know that incarceration doesn't help addiction. It's a brain disease. So we have to look at different ways of changing the laws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a percentage of people that are antisocial, criminalistic, sociopathic personalities before they get into drugs. So even post-drugs, they're still going to be lying, cheating, stealing. Okay? So anyway, thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys.